Simmons. With me, as always, is Ethan Kwan. And joining us again is Evan Tenenbaum. Let's first start off with the action last weekend. Both our teams got knocked out of the playoffs. Let's start off with the Houston Texans. Nathan Kwan, take it away.
Yeah, Saturday night it turned out into a blowout, and the Patriots ended up covering the spread. But it was a game that they had a legitimate chance of winning. They forced 3 turnovers on the Patriots. They ran the ball well. They averaged 4.5 yards per carry. The Patriots rushing game intact in the first half. They had a huge goal line stand. They got pressure on Tom Brady. I mean, Brady was very upset throughout the game at the amount of hits that he was getting from the Texans: Jadeveon Clowney, Brian Cushing, Whitney Merciless. So they really had a great chance to win. It's just they shot themselves in the foot over and over. Brock Osweiler, 3 turnovers. They gave up a kick return for a touchdown. The offensive line didn't hold up. They gave up 3 sacks. Whenever they got in the red zone, they kept kicking field goals and couldn't punch it in. And Will Fuller late in the third, early in the fourth, he dropped the touchdown pass, which would have closed the gap. So, again, they really did their best game, and the Texans defense really showed why they're number one, and they had a chance to win. It's just you can't get that type of production from the quarterback position and hope to win in the NFL. Look at the final 4 teams and look at their quarterbacks and look at what the Texans have. That definitely needs to be addressed. And the quarterback carousel of Ryan Fitzpatrick, Ryan Mallett, Brian Hoyer, Case Keenum, TJ Yates, Brandon Weeden, Tom Savage, Brock Osweiler. It continues. And what did you guys think of the game?
Well, I mean, I guess this is what an effective pass rush looks like. I mean, Jadeveon Clowney and Whitney Merciless were absolutely amazing, and a huge reason why it was only like 14-13 in the second quarter. But as you talked about before, like, this is not a good offense, or I mean, at the very least, this is a pretty poor offense due to the quarterback play. I mean, I know the offensive coordinator got let go; they parted ways, but at the same time, like, I don't think it was his decision to sign Brock Osweiler to all that money. What's your thoughts on this, Evan?
Yeah, it kind of occurred what I expected to occur. The Patriots, again, they have a Hall of Fame quarterback at their head. Hasn't slowed down even after the 4-game suspension earlier in the year.
If anything,
now that's to say that
lit a fire under him even more.
Yeah, I think so. Not having the best game of his life, he only had a 56.9 quarterback rating, which isn't that good. 18 for 38. Only averaging 7 yards per attempt. That's not that great considering Houston has the number 1 defense. Now, the adage that says that defense wins championships comes with a little reminder that you still have to have a good offense on the other side. Brock Osweiler was not good, as I'm sure that you guys have talked about countless times in this podcast, that Houston needs to figure out its quarterback situation. Just going back and forth between Osweiler and whoever. Lamar Miller was all right. Again, the running has always been the stronger side of the Houston offense. But then again, you need some semblance of an offense in order to compete with such a gargantuan offense on the other side. So it could have been a shutout, or it could have been a blowout with a little bit more confident offense on Houston's side. And this game wasn't very surprising to me.
Yeah, and you look back at last year and the playoff game that Brian Hoyer had, where he had four interceptions, and he really was run out of town. The fans the owner finally realized, he woke up that the fans will not accept this at the quarterback position. And you look at what Osweiler did on Saturday, very similar, except that Hoyer last year actually had a pretty decent season in the regular season. He didn't turn the ball over. He was the game manager. He didn't make the great throws, but you look at his stats, and Brian Hoyer was a solid quarterback last year. And you compare that to what Brock Osweiler did this year, is completely different. The only reason that you would bring him back is the money, and you have that money tied up to him next year, guaranteed. And if you cut him loose, then you're going to have to absorb a lot of that money. And so that's the only reason you would bring him back. It'll be interesting to see what they do in the offseason. I at this point, I think with knowing Bill O'Brien and how frustrated he's been with the offense, and he made some comments in the post-game press conference, basically said the offense has to be better. Like, there's no way around it. And so I think they might cut him loose and just take the hit. I don't think it's a deep quarterback draft. I mean, there's some prospects out there. Deshaun Watson obviously is at the top. You have like Deshaun Kaiser from Notre Dame, Mitch Trubisky from North Carolina. Patrick Mahomes might come out of Texas Tech, but again, he might be a system guy. Nathan Peterman out of Pittsburgh. So I don't know if it's a deep quarterback draft, but there are some interesting names in there. So definitely sure that they're going to draft one. Other priorities, they have to re-sign AJ Boye. So he broke out as a cover corner this year. The Texans learned a lesson a couple of years ago when they let Quinn go to Detroit, and their safety play hasn't been good since they let him go. So I think they need to re-sign Boye. They might have to lose Jonathan Joseph just because of salary. But I think at his age, I don't think he can stay healthy for 16 games. A linebacker that can cover. So Bernard McKinney is a great tackler and run stopper, but he cannot cover anybody. He is really slow covering running backs and tight ends. Brian Cushing can't run at this point either. So they need a fast linebacker that can cover. Safety help and more secondary depth is helpful as well. And they got to fix the special teams. The Texans have never had a good special teams. And the kicking game and punting game are one of the best in the league, but the coverage game has been terrible and the return game has been bad. So that's something they need to address as well. But enough about the Texans. Let's move on to the Cowboys and their game against the Packers. Nathan.
Yeah, well, at least it was like we said last week, it was a close game, and you predicted it absolutely correctly. It would come down to a last-second field goal. Yeah, unfortunately, it was not about who won. It was the Green Bay Packers. The Cowboys, in all fairness, got off to a very slow start. Exactly blame it on this loss on Dak Prescott, who was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, if you look at the stat line, and if I told you it was Tony Romo, I don't think anyone would be pining for Dak Prescott on the other end. Let me put it that way. But at the same time, the Cowboys found themselves down 21-3 in the first half. And because of that, they had to pretty much abandon the running game for most of it, and which had been the strong suit of this team the entire season. But even in doing so, they were able to tie it 28-28 with 4 minutes to go in the game. And just poor clock management on the last drive, I think, really prevented this game from going to overtime. In which case, if we got to overtime and we won the coin toss, we probably would have won this game. I genuinely believe that. But it's neither here nor there. The Cowboys are now knocked out of the playoffs. They now have less postseason victories than the Jacksonville Jaguars do in the past 20 years. So, which is strange to say, but the good thing about this team is that it's still young. It has a strong nucleus. There's a lot of questions going in, and they're going to have to really fix this defense, which really let down this team. Although, in all fairness, they were able to shut down Aaron Rodgers throughout most of the second half up until pretty much the last two drives of the Packers. And even then, they were able to hold them to 6 points. So not the end of the world, but they're going to need a real pass rush. I mean, obviously not one. I don't think they're going to be able to get one on the same level as the Houston Texans do right now. But I mean, they just got to get someone that can get to the quarterback next year, and then because this team should have Super Bowl aspirations for the next 5 years at the very least.
Yeah. So what I really recognize in this game, two things. One, this was very reminiscent of back when Tony Romo was, I guess, at the peak of his career. I guess anywhere from 2008 to 2014 when he was good. There are a lot of Cowboys games where they would fall behind really early because of the defense, and they would bring them back, or Romo would bring them back to within a touchdown, and then either couldn't finish or would tie the game, and then they ended up losing anyway, and then people would be blaming Romo for the loss. This game was very reminiscent of that, aside from blaming the quarterback from the loss. I think the defense played so horribly in the first half that it gave Dak Prescott a much harder time to come back from again by eliminating the run, at least in the first half. Ezekiel Elliott did end up getting 125 yards rushing for the game on 22 carries, which is, a pretty good job. But he was very limited in that first half when all the Cowboys could do was come back from 1, 2, 3 touchdowns behind. And that's the second thing. You had to attribute that to the other side. Aaron Rodgers had a great game in the first half. There were times when Green Bay would go on third down, and I automatically lost hope because it was just enough yardage for him to find someone out in the open. He didn't even have all of his receivers out there for him, but Jared Cook and Devontae Adams both stepped up, and Randall Cobb too, with just breaking away from man coverage or just finding just enough room. And Aaron Rodgers is a good enough quarterback to find that, split second where they're open, just behind the sticks for a first down. Now the second half, the Dallas defense played much better. I guess both teams ended up 6 for 11 on third downs. Green Bay only had a couple more first downs overall. So it really was a game and a half for the defense. I think they definitely need more of a pass rush, especially when you face good quarterbacks like this. They were destined, if they were going to end up playing Atlanta in the conference championship, to need to have a good pass rush against him, or if they had gotten the Super Bowl against Big Ben or Tom Brady. That's besides the point. They ended up losing. I did want to talk about also the 2 penalties in the first half that kind of killed any momentum that Dallas had in the offense. One of them was on defense, actually. The first one was Bryce Butler getting called for I don't know what specifically the name of it was, but essentially he wasn't in the play.
He was in the huddle.
Yeah, he was in the huddle.
He was in the huddle, but then he left from the play, and somehow that became unsportsmanlike conduct, and that cost him 15 yards.
Yeah,
and completely killed all momentum. But yeah, it was such a bizarre call, and not only that, the NFL came out this week saying that they shouldn't have called it anyway. So that's great to know. Thanks a lot for that, Goodell.
No, see, that's the thing, though. I actually read reports that said they did call it right, so I'm not sure who to believe at that point. Anyway, the point was that was a 22-yard completion on our side, which got negated, so that's net 37-yard loss. It killed momentum. And the second penalty was it was like on a Green Bay third down, and essentially they caught us substituting as Aaron Rodgers took the snap, and it was an incompletion because they finished out the play. But because they caught us substituting in the middle of it, they ended up getting enough yards for the first down, which this was very early in the game. So I'm wondering, had they been able to do the incompletion, we would have gotten the ball back already up 3-0 with pretty good field position. How that first quarter probably could have turned out slightly differently had Green Bay gone 3 and out in their first possession in the game. Instead, they just got first down after first down and just marched down the field the entire first half. But the point is, bad defense in the first half. Aaron Rodgers pulls a win out of his butt. Got to also give props to both Mason Crosby and Dan Bailey for kicking these clutch field goals at the very end of the game. Both when Dallas came back to tie it, and then Mason Crosby to go ahead for I guess it was a 51-yard field goal. Props to both of them. It's just very disheartening to see a season end like that.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And going back to what you were saying about Aaron Rodgers being able to catch Dallas trying to do a substitution in order to get that 5-yard penalty. I mean, that's just something that Aaron Rodgers is one of the best in the league at, is just is not only dissecting an offense, but being able to get that extra penalty. And he's just it pains me to say this, but he's arguably one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. But I think one of the most interesting things about this game too, I mean, obviously outside of Jared Cook finally turning into a great tight end, which as someone who drafted him in his fantasy league really grinds my gears. But I think the big story coming out of this is just, and something that I think really killed, that really ended up swinging it the way of Green Bay in such a close game. And that's the thing too, is just that there's there are a few small things that like the Cowboys could have done better, but since they were just small enough things, and this was such a close game, that they ended up swinging everything over towards their opponent. Was how they called short yardage plays on like 3rd and 2, and there are 3 plays that really stuck out in this game as to that I think really if by itself weren't terrible, but once added together, I think really conspired to help keep the Cowboys from winning this game. And so on during the first series, they decided to toss the ball downfield to Des Bryant, who was granted like the end zone, but he was pretty heavily covered. It was on a 3rd and 2, and then there was a 2nd and 1 in which they decided to do a screen pass and it ended up getting intercepted. And then on the final drive, after spiking the ball and then getting, I believe, 8 yards on the next play, they decide to throw it to Dez again, but this time it gets knocked down by Nick Perry. And what I want to know is, do you think they should have? I mean, obviously, hindsight being 2020, I think they should have handed it off to Zeke both times. But do you think it was understandable to put the ball in Dak's hands those times and try to have him win it?
I think, in my opinion, I think Dak didn't have any issues with all the hype of the playoffs. He did throw that one pick. Micah Hyde had a really good swim move and picked it from, I guess it was a streak that he was throwing, or a screen that he was throwing. I didn't really have any issues with what Dak was trying to do. I do think they would have wished to have ran the ball with Zeke more often, especially on that 3rd and 2 in that last drive. I think that killed the Cowboys' chances more than the spike did on 1st down, but that's just my opinion. On that 3rd and 2 where they decided to throw it instead of running it with Zeke, that would have been a good time to do that. Anyway, I just think that they kind of have their backs against the wall for most of the game, and that's mostly the defense's fault. Most of the season this year, Dak was playing with a small lead, but a good enough lead where he felt comfortable, and that's where the Cowboys excelled a lot this season. And they didn't have that kind of a game in the playoffs, which is unfortunate. Quan, what did you think about the game as an outsider?
Aaron Rodgers. I mean, that guy is unstoppable. He made some throws. That final throw to Jared Cook, where it was like 12 seconds left, and he just flung it down the left sideline, and Cook tiptoed. I mean, he's playing right now at a level that is really hard to beat. I do think the debate of should you guys have run Zeke in short yardage, I do think with that offensive line, I mean, just even with down 21-3, I think you can still mix in some runs. You can maybe speed up the tempo, but you got the best offensive line in football. So, I mean, you have to play to your strengths. And granted, Green Bay has a pretty good defense against the run, but you still got to play to your strengths. And so I think in those short yardage situations, I think you have to run the ball. I think the Cowboys did well to get back into the game. Like midway through the second quarter, when they put up 10 points in a row to really get them back into the game. I thought, as Nathan mentioned, I thought if it went into overtime, they would have won that game. But I think the issues with the Cowboys are the pass defense. I mean, I think they need a couple upgrades in the secondary, and definitely the pass rush needs to be addressed. And I think, I mean, you guys have had back-to-back first-round picks on defensive linemen, but like one is suspended for marijuana and the other one has had injury problems, right?
Yeah. Both, Randy Gregory, and that one's especially hurts because there was both Danielle Hunter and I believe Frank Clark that got drafted way after, and they've been contributing a heck of a lot more these past 2 seasons than Randy Gregory has. Although, I mean, at the same time, like, I mean, if you look through the tape that Randy Gregory had back at Nebraska, I mean, it's completely understandable why someone would try to take the chance on him, and especially since it's like it's also just marijuana. He's not really like he's not hurting anyone else except for himself and his, I guess, in a way, his family, especially since now he just became a dad. versus, I mean, and not to rehash something, but I mean, like, Michael Floyd is playing in the playoffs right now and has a chance to play in the Super Bowl, and he just got arrested for DWI after falling asleep at the wheel and being caught by the police. But that's neither here nor there. And DeMarcus Lawrence has been struggling with back problems all year. I mean, he had an 8-sack season in 2015. So I mean, the potential is still there to become a double-digit sack person. But I mean, like, they have to get upgrades on the defensive line. I mean, David Irving showed some potential, but I mean, like, they have to go out and at least sign a strong veteran, a pass rusher that can A, stay healthy, and B, at least be a good leader, and also at the very least contribute. I mean, the good thing about this free agent class is that there should be enough options out there to go get a decent pass rusher. I mean, not even like the necessarily people that are at the top end, like the Chandler Jones or Melvin Ingram, but like even people like further down, like a Jabal Sheard or Mario Addison would be pretty decent for this team. And the good thing, and speaking of which, like, they have a ton of free agents on the secondary, and I know that Pro Football Focus called the Dallas Cowboys the best secondary during the regular season, which was odd, but like kind of understandable. They actually have quite a few free agents: J.J. Wilcox, Barry Church, Mo Claiborne, and Brandon Carr, all pretty much hitting free agency, with Brandon Carr actually debating whether or not he should retire, which I mean, like, which would be understandable, would be I would say a big loss, considering that he's, for all intents and purposes, he was always able to stay on the field versus Mo Claiborne, who, granted, this year showed a lot of potential, or seemed to be finally living up to his 6th overall draft pick. But I mean, the story of his career has been injuries. I don't know who they bring back. I mean, I'd love to. I think Barry Church showed just enough to be brought back, but I'd understand if they maybe just decided to go a little cheaper and go with J.J. Wilcox, who was our best tackler, or like our heaviest hitter on defense. That being said, I would still like to keep Barry Church. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with either Brandon Carr or Mo Claiborne. I mean, both have their drawbacks. But yeah, the biggest question going forward, though, is what's going to happen to Romo? What do you guys think is going to happen to Romo?
I mean, it should be obvious that the Cowboys want to save some cap space on that contract that they have with Romo. So they're going to try and trade him. There may be a couple teams that are looking for a quarterback. Obviously, if the Texans want to take on all that contract salary, that they might want to use Romo for that. But then again, they would have an Osweiler debate, I guess. And then there are also a couple other teams: the Jets, the Broncos. I think the Bears may have it. And it just depends. I think Tony Romo has a good pedigree, and he can talk to a bunch of teams and decide what he really wants to do. I know Jerry may say other things. Jerry might say a bunch of stuff during the offseason. Just take it with a grain of salt. But I do think the Cowboys would want to get rid of Roto, and this is in the end of an era, and this is really sad. 2 playoff wins in his 11 years of playing pretty well. It's just really sad.
Yeah. Let's move on. Let's talk about the championship games this weekend. So first up is the NFC Championship in Atlanta, with the Packers playing the Falcons. This looks like it's going to be a shootout. You have 2 of the top quarterbacks in the league, and Matt Ryan and Aaron Rodgers. Both defenses really struggled. They not top defenses in the league. But what do you guys think of the game?
I strongly dislike Aaron Rodgers. That's what I think. I think the Cowboys should be in it. Never mind. But I agree. It's going to be a shootout. It's going to be interesting to see, because basically it's going to be between an Aaron Rodgers who's basically carrying the entire offense versus Matt Ryan, who's having a career year but also has arguably the greatest supporting cast outside of Dallas. I mean, just Julio Jones is amazing, and you have the best 1-2 punch in the league in terms of running backs with Devontae Freeman and
Coleman.
And the thing about it is that it might also come down to defenses where the Atlanta Falcons actually have quite a few playmakers on the defensive side of the ball, with Vic Beasley leading the league in sacks, and you have Keanu Neal, who contributed right away as a safety after being drafted this past year. Arguably they might. While I want to say Atlanta would win, I'm going to say Green Bay will win just to jinx them, because I've been picking against them every week and I'm getting tired of it. So I'm gonna pick Green Bay in this, hopefully jinx them.
Like I said in the last time I was on the podcast, I do not believe in the Eli Manning devil magic anymore. I'm now an Aaron Rodgers devil magic guy, and you can see it. They've run the table. They won the last 6 weeks of the season. They beat a pretty evenly matched Giants team that had a better defense, but not as good of an offense. They beat a great Cowboys team that they were underdogs in by sheer will. And you know what? This Atlanta Falcons team isn't built that much differently than the Cowboys are. I think their offense is much better, but then again, their defense is that much worse. Point differential in the regular season was 134. They were the highest scoring offense in the game, so in the league. So you got to take that into consideration. Atlanta was 5-3 at home this season. Green Bay, you don't really look at their regular season because they did have that bad first half of the year, and they've just been outstanding in the back. But like I said, I'm a devil magic believer now, and I do believe Green Bay is going to go to the Super Bowl, and it's going to be terrible.
Yeah, I'm going to go Atlanta. What the Falcons did against the Seahawks last week was impressive. I thought that'd be a close game going into the fourth quarter, but the way the Falcons threw the ball against Seattle's secondary, that impressed me. I think Vic Beasley getting pressure against like the offensive line of the Packers and like Brian Bulaga, I think that's going to be a key matchup. On the flip side, I think Nick Perry and Clay Matthews going against the Falcons offensive line. I think whichever team can really get pressure on the other quarterback and maybe force him into some mistakes. I mean, in a shootout game, turnovers could turn the tide real quickly, and so I think just look up front. I think that will be a good matchup. On the outside, of course, the playmakers, Julio Jones, Laguerre Dunter of Green Bay struggled last week against Dez Bryant, so we'll see what he does against Julio Jones this week. And I think Green Bay's playmakers, Devontae Adams is banged up, so I don't know. I think the Packers, this is where they fall. I picked them the past 3 weeks, but I just what Atlanta did against Seattle really impressed me. So I'm going to go Atlanta in this one. So in the second game, the AFC Championship, we had the Pittsburgh Steelers against the New England Patriots. Seems like these two teams are in the AFC Championship every season. What do you guys think about this one?
I think NFL ratings win and everybody in America loses. I think, well, to be real, I'm going Pats here. I think that Le'Veon Bell does a good job on giving Ben Roethlisberger an option, at least on the offensive side. I think Tom Brady and his receiving core is just too good facing this Pittsburgh Steelers D.
Yeah, picking back off of all that, it's Tom Brady, it's Bill Belichick. It's hard to pick against them, but you know what? Screw it, I'll do it. This is the original and arguably the best killer bees I've ever seen. What I like about this Pittsburgh team is that they can either beat you they have arguably the best running back in the league. They have the best wide receiver, and while I absolutely loathe Roethlisberger, I cannot stand him. He will go down as he is a Hall of Fame quarterback. There's no denying that. And this Pittsburgh defense, while it's not as good as the ones with which they were able to win 2 Super Bowls with, they still have enough talent on that side to probably slow down Tom Brady just enough that they can't keep up with such a good offense. What's your take, Nathan Kwan?
Yeah, I'm going to go New England. So I think the Patriots did just enough. I think they played a pretty poor game, but they were still able to blow out the Texans. And I think the Texans have the best defense that they'll face for the remainder of the playoffs. And I think they were still able to put up 33 points against them. The Steelers, their offense really struggled last week in Kansas City. That was surprising to me. touchdown. They just relied on 6 Chris Boswell field goals. But I think the Steelers struggle to match up against Julian Edelman. I mean, he's a matchup nightmare for any team. He's so shifty on those underneath throws. I think the offensive line holds up against James Harrison and Bud Dupree of the Steelers pass rush. And Tom Brady, what can you say about him? He just knows how to win in the playoffs. And so I think I look on the outside, I think Malcolm Butler will be able to do enough against Antonio Brown for the Steelers that Pittsburgh's offense struggled last week. I think they struggle a little bit this week as well. And so I got New England in this one. So moving on, let's talk briefly about the NBA. The Rockets are struggling a little bit. They had a 2-2 week. Brooklyn, they beat the Bucks on Wednesday night, but then they had a really and last night they got blown out by the Warriors. Their schedule at this point is really brutal. I think they've gone through 3 sets of back-to-backs in the past 2 weeks in a stretch of like 17 games in 31 days, which is kind of ridiculous. So they're kind of fatigued right now. We'll see what coming week and going into the All-Star break. Mentioning briefly the All-Star starters, the NBA announced the All-Star game starters this past week. The new voting system with the players and the media playing 50% of the vote worked out. So in the past system, Zaza Pachulia would have been a starting forward, but he did not get in this time. So in the Western Conference, it was James Harden and Steph Curry in the backcourt. And in the front court, you had Anthony Davis, Kevin Durant, and Kawhi Leonard. And in the East, it was in the backcourt, Kyrie Irving and DeMar DeRozan. And in the front court, LeBron James, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Jimmy Butler. And so I think the NBA did well in picking their starters. I think obviously Russell Westbrook is the big name that was left off. But really between Curry and Westbrook, I mean, Curry has a popular vote with the fans, 2-time MVP. And so you could say Westbrook got snubbed, but he'll for sure get in as a reserve and he'll play a big part in that game in New Orleans. But let's move on. Let's talk about baseball. Evan.
Yep. So, us Houston Texans and Dallas Cowboys fans are, kind of bummed about the loss this week. But just remember that spring training is only 3 to 4 weeks away. Pitchers and catchers report next February. But before that, we still got a couple signings that happened in the last week. This may be, these next 3-4 weeks may be a lot of small minor signings, but these are probably the last couple major signings that you'll probably hear about until spring training. The first is probably the most famous, at least in the Texas area. Jose Bautista did re-sign with the Toronto Blue Jays. He got a 1-year, $18 million contract, slightly above the qualifying offer that he was offered and then denied. He also has a mutual option. I think it's for $17 million in 2018. Mutual options are basically like both parties decide whether or not to keep the player on contract. If Jose Bautista has a good year, he may want to opt out, or if he has a bad year, then Toronto could opt out. And then he also has a bonus incentive where he can earn up to $900,000, depending on home club attendance. Basically, he'll get $150,000 for every 100,000 fans that go through the gate. So, as a Texas Ranger fan, I will gladly tell any people that I know in Toronto to not show up to games, just so he won't get extra money. But yeah, Jose Bautista, 1 year, $18 million. Much lower than he had, quote unquote, requested both at the beginning of the offseason and last year when he made all those remarks during spring training. He definitely hurt his value by having a very subpar year. Only pulled one more. He did play only 116 games, but he was hurt for a while. But he wasn't exactly that great this year playing for Toronto, and his defense is almost deteriorated to the point where he may have to go to full-time DH. So I wouldn't be exactly thrilled if I were a Toronto Blue Jays fan looking for the future, especially with Encarnacion gone too. So yeah, he'll be there for another year. The only thing I'm glad about him signing with Toronto is now I don't have to hate Toronto and whatever team that Jose Bautista was going to end up going on if he had left. Now I could just save all my hate for that team. the 6 times, 7 times per game that the Rangers will play him. Secondly, Mark Trumbo. This is kind of a late first baseman's market this year, but Mark Trumbo signed an extension with the Baltimore Orioles, 3 years, $37.5 million. I actually don't like this signing. I think Trumbo is way overrated. Sabermetrically, he is not that impressive. He only pulled 1.6 WAR last year. He did lead the league in homers, but outside of homers, there really isn't any strong points of his game. He's a pitiful defender. He strikes out a whole lot. Now Baltimore has 2, Chris Davis and Mark Trumbo, to do that, all for them. And so I guess if you're looking for power, then Trumbo's your guy. But this is his first 40. This is his first big homer season in quite a while. He did have 34 in 2013, but this looks like one of those years where you have a really good year and then you won't have such a good rebound. And this is just on speculation. And sabermetrically, again, he doesn't look good, so I don't expect him to really repeat what he did last year with Baltimore. So if you're one of those Baltimore Orioles fans.
And the other thing, too, is that's I mean, I don't know if they've already set aside enough money to re-sign Manny Machado, but I mean, like this, if they haven't, then this is less money with which they can re-sign him, and he's like right up there with Mike Trout and Bryce Harper as like one of the best young players in the league. So if I were them personally, I would be making sure that like I'm setting aside enough money to keep Manny Machado on my team for basically forever.
Not only that, Baltimore has a lot of trouble with pitching. They signed Giovanni Gallardo last year. He turned out horrible, and now he's trying to make a comeback in Seattle. They don't have a great pitching staff. If I were Baltimore, I would have wanted to save my money for A, Machado, and B, good pitching. And now they just signed these giant extensions with Trumbo and Chris Davis. We're going to do nothing but strike out a bunch. And they may hit a bunch of homers in the next couple of years, but at the end of Trumbo's contract in 2019, like Baltimore may be at the bottom of the division. Their window was closing pretty fast, and I don't think they addressed the pitching that they needed. So, yeah, Trumbo going to Baltimore. And then the last major signing, quote-unquote, Will Myers has an extension with San Diego, 6 years, $83 million. And once again, this is just a signing that I don't quite understand. It's quite a lot of money. San Diego is rebuilding right now. They have a pitiful rotation. They have a pitiful relief squad. They have Solarte, which is good, but like Will Myers getting 6 years, $83 million, that's a lot for a guy who's only hit, I guess, the AAV value above that once, when that was last year. He struggled when he was in Tampa Bay. He did get Rookie of the Year his first year, but he struggled his second year, enough to San Diego wanting him in a trade. And he did have a pretty good year last year. I don't think he's good enough defensively and sabermetrically to take on such a large extension so soon, especially for a team that's not exactly spending money in the next couple of years. This might look good for like attendance-wise if you want to keep people in the seats in San Diego. Another way to do that is to take your NFL team and move them to LA. But other than that, I think Will Myers is a good like a face for a Padres crowd, but that team is not going to do much for the next 3 years. And I think his talents might be wasted on a San Diego team.
Yeah, Myers was on my fantasy team last year. He really had a good first half, which got him to the All-Star game. I think he's similar to Rangers outfielder who went to Colorado. He struggled in the second half, right? And that's what brought his value down a little bit in my eyes.
Yeah, so I mean, if I were San Diego, I would have taken that into effect. I think Texas did the right thing by passing on. You were talking about Ian Desmond. They did the right thing by passing on him for his very subpar second half. Maybe San Diego's not in a position to do that because they're not being very competitive right now. I just think that contract is a little bit too much for Will Myers. If it was about maybe 75% of what it was, then I'd understand that.
Yeah, six years is a long time.
Yeah. Well, at the very least, like Will Myers is still like somewhat young, but like he's not. I mean, like we were talking about with like Bryce Harper and Mike Trout and like Manny Machado, he's not on that level. So it's again like maybe they have enough confidence in that he has the work ethic to keep up that high level that he had in the first half. But I mean, and that's the thing too. It's AJ Preller who's used to taking these types of risks and doesn't seem all that worried about taking on a ton of money and ton of contracts. I mean, he did trade for Matt Kemp and I mean, signed James Shields and all that. So I mean, it's not exactly like AJ Preller's ever been like super careful
Yeah,
when it comes to his money.
I
But
was the unfortunate fool when he signed Kemp and when he signed Shields that was a great signing and that they were going to compete for the division. Oh boy, how was I wrong? And they've gone completely the opposite direction, which is, again, San Diego. If you're a fan of San Diego teams, this is not a good time for you. And a couple of Rangers notes, just auxiliary stuff. Josh Hamilton did officially sign his minor league contract. His clause says if he's not on the major league team by the time the regular season starts, he could opt out. I didn't read the details of it, but I heard someone said that he would just go on waivers and may come back to the Rangers anyway. And then James Loney signed a minor league deal with the Rangers as well. Could be a 1 year, a $1 million contract if he makes the major league team. And then Dylan G also signed, the pitcher signed a minor league contract with the Rangers. The thing about the only reason I'm bringing these up is because we're talking about two spots on the team that could potentially be open to them. In the fifth rotation spot, now you're looking at Tyson Ross to fill that role, but he won't be ready for opening day. So Dylan G joins the cavalcade of pitchers that are in that spot to compete. AJ Griffin, Nick Martinez, Chichi Gonzalez, Michael Housechild, even Johan Hernandez, who I doubt will make the team. They all have shots at making that fifth rotation spot, and it's only temporary. So it'll be interesting to see. That could affect how the Rangers play the first month of the season. And then the other two, James Loney and Josh Hamilton. Josh Hamilton's actually going to be working out at first base now. I'm pretty sure his outfielding days are done. He may play spot starter there too, but he's going to be a first baseman now. Him and Loney might get some major league time, depending on if Joey Gallo has a good spring training or not. Joey Gallo is right now poised to be the opening day first baseman, but there's still a lot of questions about his game. Ryan Rua might spell him out, and we don't know what's going on with the first baseman market regarding Mike Napoli and Chris Carter. So the first baseman spot could be up for grabs by the end of spring training, at least for the Rangers. Of course, that entire position's been a cavalcade of players ever since Mark Teixeira left. So it'll be interesting to see who will fill that role at the end of spring training. But again, spring training is in about 3 or 4 weeks. We'll see what happens then. And the last bit of baseball news, a pretty big thing happened this week. The Major League Baseball Hall of Fame inductees were announced for this year. 3 very deserving players got in: Tim Raines, Buzz Rodriguez, and Jeff Bagwell. I figure we could take the time to talk about at least Pudge and Jeff a lot. So I'll start with, I guess, Jeff Bagwell. So Jeff Bagwell, he played with the Astros from 91 to 2005. Played in 2,150 games, 449 career home runs, 1,529 RBIs, 297 batting average, 408 OBP, 540 slugging. He racked up 79.6 WAR. He was in MVP of 1994. He made a bunch of All-Star games, and he was the Rookie of the Year. Nathan, I guess you grew up watching him. What does this Hall of Fame induction mean to you?
Well deserved. I think Houston baseball fans who grew up in the mid to late 90s or early 2000s, he and Craig Biggio they created the fan base in Houston. Houston has always and always will be a football town, but he and Craig Biggio made baseball relevant. And I think like everybody growing up, if you play baseball, you try to mimic that exaggerated stance where he's like sitting in a chair. Bagwell, I think the numbers he put up in the Astrodome, one of the worst hitting ballparks in Major League history, I think are outstanding. And any steroid suspicion with him has just been speculation. He's never been named in any reports. So I think that's maybe what kept him out for the past 5 years, but I think it's definitely well deserved, and I'm really happy for him, and for him and the team, for them to finally reach the World Series in 2005. Granted, Bagwell didn't have a big impact on that team. He was hurt by the end of his career, but to see him be able to experience the World Series, I think it was a great cap to his career. And so I'm just really happy when I heard the news. Astros fans, city were really happy, and well deserved for he and Craig Biggio to be Hall of Fame teammates.
I mean, no offense, I didn't really follow the Astros much, but you have to look at, looking at the numbers, he obviously deserved to. I was always admittedly, I was a bit more partial to Craig Biggio because, again, he also had like 3,000 hits. But at the same time, Bagwell, and just for at least making Astros baseball relevant. And I know you mentioned before, but that while he didn't help the Astros make it to the World Series that 1 year, he definitely is synonymous with Astros baseball. So again, 100% well deserved.
Yeah, and it's just funny how baseball trades end up working out. He was traded for Larry Anderson in 1990. And so he was a third baseman. He came up and he eventually moved over to first base. Yeah, he actually was the first 30-30 first baseman in Major League history. So he hit 30 home runs and stole 30 bases. So he wasn't just your stereotypical first baseman power hitter. He also had speed earlier in his career.
Yeah, congrats to Jeff and his family. I'm sure his induction in the Hall of Fame as an Astro will be a good thing. Another Texas icon also gone to the Hall of Fame, Ivan Pudge Rodriguez. He got on the first ballot. He's the second catcher to ever get inducted on the first ballot behind Johnny Bench. So Pudge Rodriguez, he played from 1991 to 2011, 2011. He played with 6 different teams, a majority of his time spent with the Texas Rangers. He ended up getting 10 Gold Gloves in a row from 92 to 2001. He also tacked on 3 more with Detroit. He was a 14-time All-Star. He won the MVP vote in 1999 in the AL. And he also had 7 Silver Sluggers in his career. He also won the 2003 World Series with the Florida Marlins. And also, he had a significant positive impact on a very bad Detroit Tigers team in the early 2000s. When he signed with them, he basically turned them around. He obviously as a more of a glue kind of guy during that time. But a majority of his career was spent with Texas. He is the Texas Rangers icon. If you ask a bunch of people, at least new fans, that Pudge Rodriguez was Mr. Texas Ranger. He ended up grossing 2,543 games in his career. He has the most games caught of anybody in history. He only had 311 home runs, 296, 334, 464 splits in his career. And he racked up 68.4 WAR, a majority of that with the Rangers. So I guess me and Nathan Simmons grew up watching Pudge Rodriguez. And this is just very emotional, just knowing that he was the main guy that got me into baseball. It was somewhere in the late 90s where I went to my first game. And I didn't remember much about it, but I do remember Pudge Rodriguez, and I do remember the crowd chanting his name. And I do remember a bunch of people wearing his jerseys. And I had a bat that had the Silver Slugger inductee on it. So it really inspired me to love the game of baseball, and I'm so happy that he got in, especially on the first ballot. Simmons, what did you think?
Basically everything you said. I mean, he is the quintessential Texas Ranger, and I think there's a strong argument to say that he'll go down as the greatest Texas Ranger of all time. I mean, obviously, depends on like who else comes up, who else becomes a Ranger, but I mean, he definitely personified the Rangers in all of baseball, really. I mean, the other thing too is that he was always such a class act. I mean, he was one of the most likable players of all time too, and maybe that's the reason why like a lot of like while Jose Canseco did accuse him of PEDs, that it was hard to believe that he was like part of that, because at the same time like he was so good at so many facets of the game, whether it be like just being a solid hitter, getting .300, get like his All-Star season. I mean, just looking through that is just absolutely absurd, because he had like I think like 25 stolen bases on top of that, and it just baffles my mind to think of him as getting that many stolen bases. But I mean, he'll also arguably go down as the greatest defensive catcher of all time too. And my favorite bar mitzvah gift that I ever got was a ball signed by Pudge Rodriguez, and that I hope I still have. I don't know where I last put it. Where I'm pretty sure it's in my room, back at home, or former home. But man, love Pudge. I mean, it makes me so happy, and on top of all that, I mean, like the minute he leaves the Rangers, he helps the Marlins win their second World Series. And then he leaves, goes to Detroit, and like you said, like helps bring that team together and helped lead the World Series to a World Series, which they lost to the St. Louis Cardinals. But nonetheless, I mean, just the guy almost everywhere he went, he made the team better. And that if that's not the mark of a true Hall of Famer, I don't know what is.
He played half a season with Houston. Quan, did he make it that much of an impact during his time in Houston?
No, that was the very tail end. That was when the Astros were trying to hold on to their World Series core, and they were signing a bunch of veterans who really couldn't play anymore. So that wasn't too good for him. I think he hit like 150 or something. But from Pudge, just growing up, was video game arm. Like, so you would play the video game, you couldn't run on him. Like, it was impossible to run on him. And I think the 13 Gold Gloves, the best defensive catcher and perhaps in Major League history, I think is amazing. Just watching him defensively, and you throw in those offensive numbers, steroid accusations or not. I mean, he leads all catchers in games, hits, extra base hits. So definitely well deserved, and he squeaked by, but he's the first ballot Hall of Famer, and not many people can say that.
Yeah, congrats to him and his family. Rangers can be retiring his number in August. It's the first number retired that they've done in quite a while. I think Nolan Ryan was the last one. So I guess no one else will ever wear number 7 again, playing for the Rangers, which is cool. Then the final inductee is Tim Raines. On his last year on the ballot, he finally got in. He played a little bit before our time, but I'll just kind of summarize his stats. He played from 1979 all the way up to 2002, though, I mean, the last 6 years, but he was kind of a part-time player. He played mostly with the Montreal Expos. He made the All-Star team 7 times, finished top 5 and MVP once. He was a stolen base machine, 808 stolen bases in his career. He led the league 4 times. He also had a slash line of 294, 385, 425. And he racked up 69.1 WAR in his career. Not the greatest defensive player, but he was very good base running, very good contact hitter. And, you know, he definitely brought life to the game in an era before the steroids did. Another player who played a lot for the Expos but did not get in. And we can talk about the guys who didn't come in, did get in. So Vlad Guerrero, fell short. He fell 15 votes short of induction, 71.7%. He played a majority of his career with the Expos and a little bit with the Angels and the Rangers. He'll get his time. Trevor Hoffman was only 5 votes short, possibly the second best reliever in the last 20 years. I mean, obviously Mariano Rivera, but you would have to think for a time where he held the saves record, that should have been enough to get Trevor Hoffman in. He's just short. And then a lot of these steroid era players, the big names, Roger Clemens, 54.1%, Barry Bonds, 53.8%, Kurt Schilling, 45%, Manny Ramirez, 23.8%. Very, very variable ranges of percentages there. Sammy Sosa, 8.6%, just barely staying on the ballot. And then a couple players who actually fell off. Jorge Posada, 3.8%. He falls off the ballot. Magglio Ordonez, 0.7%. Falls out. I think only got like 3 votes. And then Lee Smith, 34.2%, which would be enough to stay on. But this is his 15th year, I believe, now on the ballot. I think he ages out. So those are the players that didn't quite make it. Obviously, got players like Hoffman and Guerrero that were pretty close that might get in soon. And you got the steroid era players who are kind of in the middle. What do you guys think about the players who didn't make it in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, so I think the logjam on the ballot where you can only vote for 10 players, I think is evident here. I think players like Guerrero and Hoffman, who will get in eventually, them not getting in really hurts their steroid era guys. I think Clemens and Bond are trending upwards, so it seems like the voters are relaxing a little bit more on them. I think those two and a player like Manny Ramirez are different. Ramirez tested positive twice after their baseball really cracked down on the steroid testing. And so, and the fact that he really didn't have as good a career as those two will be a struggle for him. I think a little disappointed to see Billy Wagner only down at 10.2%. I think he was in the league. He was one of the top closers for a period about 10 years between the Astros and the Phillies. And so, granted, he doesn't have like the great Hall of Fame numbers, but I would have liked to see a little more support for Billy Wagner. Mike Mussina, I think, is a borderline guy. I think he gets more support just because of he played in New York and that market. Kurt Schilling, I think, keeps his mouth shut. He might have been in by now, but he keeps opening his mouth and saying stupid things. And so I think that's really hurt his candidacy. But I think if you look at his numbers, I think he's a Hall of Famer. He said, has brushed voters the wrong way, and he just can't seem to keep his mouth shut. So that's my thoughts on the rest of those guys.
Yeah, I mean, I agreed on that one. And that's another thing, too, is that, like, I know it's supposed to be, like, objective because it's just supposed to be the numbers. But, I mean, at the same time, like people are – it's their free will. It's their, like, you know, autonomy on, like, who they get to choose for. And if they don't feel motivated to vote for you, then it's more your fault than necessarily theirs, you know? And that's something Kurt Schilling, like, if it really does bother him that he's not in the Hall of Fame by now, that's something that he should really look into, is that, well, maybe it's his fault and that he should, like, I don't know, be less of a dick. I mean, that's just me. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, outside of that, I mean, it's looking like Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, who arguably the best players of their era, at both at the respective things that they did, which was like hit and pitch. It looks like they're going to be in the Hall of Fame sooner rather than later. I mean, it's nice to see Vlad get that much love right off the bat. I do want to say, though, that Jorge Posada was it's kind of sad to see Jorge Posada drop off already, just because, like, I mean, he played for so long. He contributed to, I believe, 4 World Series. And he didn't put up bad numbers. It was just that he was like versus someone like Pudge, like he wasn't necessarily like the best at his position for his entire career, but he always put up solid numbers, and he played for so long. But unfortunately, no one's going to really get another chance to reconsider him. So yeah, that's the way ball breaks.
Yeah, and I think that's just because of the log jam of players. There's so many players on the ballot, you can only vote for 10, and you have idiots that are like not voting for any players because they're trying to take a stance on Baseball needs to decide what they're going to do with these steroid era players. And so I think that's just the stupidity of voters just turning in blank ballots. You're really hurting the candidacy of a lot of these players, and like players like Posada, who maybe not Hall of Fame numbers, but definitely deserve more than 1 year of consideration.
Yeah, I definitely think they need to review specifically the rules regarding writers putting in their ballots. It may be radical to even just say you need to put at least one name on the ballot, because then again, you could think maybe there really aren't any in 1 year that aren't Hall of Fame worthy. That's besides the point. Steroid era players have about 5 or 6 years left until their time they'd fall off the ballot. They've been trending upward. It'll eventually happen. Now, hopefully, it won't happen during times where like deserving players who have retired in the last 5 years or so, like Jim Tomei, Roy Halladay, Derek Jeter, Mariano Rivera, people like that. They might get mixed in with them. So it'll be interesting to see the next 5 years of Hall of Faming whenever that happens. So I guess we're done with baseball. It was a long baseball segment this week. This should be the last major baseball news until spring training starts.
Yeah, so that brings us to our final shout-out segment. So I guess let's shout out Matt Coleman, the prospect we talked about a little bit last week. He picked Texas, and so hopefully he can help the Longhorns next year. This season looks like a lost year, but next year, hope springs eternal.
Yeah, he definitely brings an immediate point guard presence to this deplorable basketball team, which plays Kansas in a little bit. I'll probably watch it, and it'll be a massive blowout. But they desperately needed a point guard to anchor that team, and they'll get that next year. And so an upperclassman, Tevin Mack, plus Coleman, plus if Jared Allen decides to stay, this team will definitely rebound and probably be a tournament team next year, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. And the good thing about Matt Coleman is that he also might help with recruiting even this year. And a name that's been linked with him for a while has been Mo Bamba, who I believe is a top 10 player on the high school circuit right now. So hopefully he's able to get him in, and then we'll have a very solid team that has a very good opportunity to maybe make it to the Final Four in a long time for the Longhorns. But yeah.
And then another shout out to Sam Dyson, who the Rangers closer, who will be participating in the World Baseball Classic with Team USA. I know there'll be a couple other Ranger players on that team and a couple other Astro players on that team. So represent your country well, Sam Dyson. Just don't throw any one-on-one pitches to a guy named Jose Bautista, because I've heard he can throw those over the fence. And then Jim Joyce is retiring from umpiring. If you don't know who Jim Joyce is, he was the umpire who ruined Armando Galarraga's perfect game back in 2010. And aside from that, he was actually a pretty consistent umpire. But he's calling it quits. We'll see who gets to take his role as the most infamous umpire in Major League Baseball.
Well, in all fairness, I think he's a better ump than Joe West, but we'll see.
Angel Hernandez, anybody? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, maybe we should just spend next podcast talking about all the umpires we hate.
Yeah.
Okay, well that wraps it up for this week, guys. We'll talk to you guys next week.
Talk to you guys then.